Many viewers of the classic 1994 film Forrest Gump have long been perplexed by the terrible ending that Jenny, Robin Wright, experiences. Many viewers are confused since the movie implies that Jenny dies after testing positive for HIV, yet it never says that she has AIDS. The film's departures from Winston Groom's book Forrest Gump are to blame for the vagueness surrounding Jenny's cause of death. If you want to know what the filmmakers were going for, you have to see the whole thing. The film is on Forrest Gump's remarkable life journey, which is connected to his unwavering love for Jenny, even though she may be unpredictable and cruel at times. As the plot develops, Jenny's inner turmoil and the trauma she endured in her childhood become more apparent. Her inner problems and her background of abuse are delicately hinted at throughout the film, from which she never fully recovers. Despite making Jenny's HIV status very evident, the film chooses not to disclose her AIDS diagnosis. This is one of the many confusing things about the film. We can only speculate as to the filmmaker's intentions and the story's potential advantage from this omission. Some have hypothesized that this decision was taken in an effort to keep the picture lighthearted and preserve an air of innocence and nostalgia throughout. Forrest Gump was out at a time when the AIDS epidemic was wreaking havoc on people all over the globe. Although the film never explicitly states it, the historical context of the film leads fans and experts to believe that Jenny's death was caused by HIV, even if the film never confirms it. There is an alternative ending to Jenny's narrative in Winston Groom's original book, which differs from the one in the film. Readers are forced to speculate about Jenny's cause of death in the novel since the author chooses not to reveal her exact ailment. The character of Jenny, her trials, and her ultimate destiny are explored in more depth in the book. In Forrest Gump, Jenny's death signifies the end of a poignant and touching journey that she and Forrest have experienced together throughout their entwined lives. Their friendship in the Alabama little town of Greenbow becomes the foundation of their relationship. Forrest and Jenny's connection is special since Jenny has had a troubled past full of abuse and instability, while Forrest is innocent and faithful. The turbulent background of the Vietnam War period causes their destinies to separate as they get older. While many of his generation were conscripted into duty, Forrest enlists in the military because of his love for Jenny. This decision demonstrates Forrest's steadfast commitment to keeping his word to Jenny and writing her letters while he is abroad. Unfortunately, his letters always come back with the devastating invalid mailing address stamp. Forrest becomes a legendary hero after his exploits in the Vietnam War, for which he receives the Medal of Honor. The setting is a demonstration in opposition to the war in Iraq in the nation's capital. Forrest and Jenny had a short reunion in 1967. The fact that they crossed paths at this watershed point in American history is a potent symbol of how the tumultuous times affected each of them individually. Even though they're back together, Forrest and Jenny's destinies keep dragging them apart. Jenny goes on a nomadic lifestyle for over a decade, while Forrest leads his own life filled with incredible accomplishments and meetings with famous people. When Jenny goes back to her hometown in Alabama in 1976, she and Forrest have a passionate kiss. Sadly, this meeting only adds fuel to the fire of Jenny's ebb and flow in Forrest's life, making him want for a more substantial and permanent bond with her. The first conflict of the film is on what happened to separate Forrest and Jenny, illustrating how their lives were impacted by outside factors. But the film's last act explores the factors that bring them back together, illuminating the depth and longevity of their connection. Their long and troubled past is finally put to rest when they reunite, which is both a relief and a reminder of the profound emotional pain that each character has endured. One of the most important parts of Forrest Gump is the climax, which clarifies the film's concept and provides two major disclosures that change the course of events. Jenny reveals to Forrest in 1981 that she understood the real purpose of his years-long trek across America and draws him to Georgia in the process. The story's emotional foundations and Forrest's character are both enhanced by this discovery. It's a sign of how close Jenny is to Forrest that she knows why he ran across the nation. The pain of losing them and the longing for their shared history clearly motivated Forrest's incredible trek. This understanding of Forrest's emotions and his steadfast love for Jenny strengthens the film's emotional foundation. Jenny gives birth to their baby, Forrest Jr., Haley Joel Osment, and Forrest finds out about it not long after. The fact that Forrest and Jenny's connection has stood the test of time and distance is shown by this discovery. It represents the pinnacle of their intricate bond and the joint heritage they have built. In the midst of all the happiness surrounding their reunion and the birth of their child, a dark undercurrent develops as Forrest finds out that Jenny has an unnamed illness, something like some kind of virus. The film doesn't give any clear explanation for her illness, leaving it shrouded in mystery. The audience are left to confront the unpredictability of Jenny's condition, which heightens the sense of mystery and poignancy surrounding her destiny, thanks to this intentional absence. The film takes place in the early 1980s, and viewers have long wondered what Jenny did in her younger years to bring on her sickness. Since both HIV/AIDS and hepatitis C were major health issues at the time, the current hypotheses have focused on one of them. Viewers are prompted to contemplate not just Jenny's personal battles, but also the larger social and medical milieu of her day by the uncertainty surrounding her diagnosis. In an interview conducted in 2019, Eric Roth, the author of Forrest Gump, dished out vital details about Jenny's condition, answering a long-standing fan curiosity. Roth states that Jenny passed away due to advanced HIV. With this new information, the riddle of her disease was fully solved, and we can now put an end to the speculation about its origin. In retrospect, the question that had persisted since the film's premiere was finally answered by Roth's affirmation during the interview, which lent more complexity to the narrative. As a result, the relationship between Jenny's terrible demise and the AIDS epidemic, which struck in the 1980s and 1990s and claimed the lives of innumerable others, became even more apparent. The original plan for the sequel was to delve more into Forrest's and Forrest Jr.'s lives. Roth said that Forrest Jr.'s late-stage HIV, which he inherited from his mother Jenny, would have been the first plot point of the sequel. A complicated and emotionally charged element to the tale would have been added had this plot explored the intergenerational effect of HIV/AIDS. In addition, Roth shared a hilariously gloomy scenario he wrote for the sequel that highlighted the difficulties Forrest Jr. experienced as a result of his illness. The actual desegregation busing in Florida that occurred around the same time period served as the setting for the picture. In this made-up scene, some parents are upset and unwilling to send their kids to the same school as Forrest Jr., who was afflicted with AIDS. This causes friction in the family. This disagreement brought to light the societal misconceptions and stigmas surrounding HIV/AIDS at the time, showing that even a comedic picture like Forrest Gump could handle weighty social topics with grace and comedy. The HIV narrative and the darker, more complicated undercurrent that the filmmakers had planned for the axed Forrest Gump sequel were both illuminated by Eric Roth's admissions. Tom Hanks's character, Forrest Gump, rode shotgun in O.J.'s back in an interesting and perhaps weird sequence set in the next sequel. During the notorious Los Angeles highway pursuit in 1994 in Simpson's Ford Bronco, Forrest would have been there in the middle of one of the most shocking and watched television events of all time if this incident had occurred. It's a fascinating idea since it would have let the movie include its fictitious character into actual historical events, similar to how Forrest Gump blurred the boundaries between fact and fiction. Forrest and Princess Diana's ballroom dance was another unforgettable and moving sequence that Roth penned for the sequel. The terrible death of Princess Diana in 1997 added a touching and emotional background to this scene. The film's subject of unexpected links between common people and historical individuals is emphasized by the thought of Forrest dancing with a real-life princess, which adds a touch of whimsicality to the plot. A scene with a Native American individual who Forrest befriends added another emotional twist to Roth's writing, Sadly, the explosion in Oklahoma City in 1995 was going to be the last for this figure. This tragic domestic terrorist attack that rocked the country would have added a thoughtful tone to the film, drawing attention to the characters' interdependence and the ways in which past events have shaped their present. Forrest Gump has a gloomy undercurrent due to the unanswered issue of whether Jenny may have transmitted HIV to Forrest and their kid, Forrest Jr. This idea isn't dealt with directly in the film, but it does raise some interesting questions about the characters' futures. In the event that Jenny given the possibility of mother-to-child transmission associated with HIV, it is likely that Forrest's son, Forrest Jr., may have been born with the virus if she did transmit it to him. In this made-up situation, Forrest and his kid face a new level of emotional and physiological difficulties, which might affect them in profound ways. To begin, Forrest would need antiretroviral medication and ongoing monitoring for the remainder of his life if he were HIV positive. The story of Forrest's life would have been told from a different angle, highlighting his strength while dealing with an extra health issue. Forrest Jr. would have a distinct set of challenges as an HIV-positive child, including the need for early and ongoing specialist medical treatment. In an era when knowledge of the illness was limited, the film would have had to go into the difficulties and stigmas of being born with HIV. The film's central theme, Forrest's success in spite of his learning disabilities, would also become more convoluted. In order to showcase Forrest's incredible resiliency and resolve, the tale would have to traverse the junction of his cognitive issues with his new health condition. Forrest Gump stays true to its central message and narrative style by purposefully leaving Forrest's HIV status unclear. I completely agree with you that the movie never once implies that Forrest is HIV positive. On the contrary, Jenny's diagnosis is intentionally left unclear so that viewers might guess without Forrest's status being confirmed. Instead of diving into medical specifics, the video focuses on Forrest's experiences and emotional journey. Given that the film doesn't reveal when Jenny was sick, the exact timing of the transmission of the virus is still up in the air. Without overwhelming the tale with sadness, this ambiguity lets viewers enjoy the story's main themes and offers opportunity for interpretation. Creators choose not to dig into the particulars of physical issues since Forrest Gump is really a story about love, endurance, and the human spirit. It became apparent to the filmmakers that the darker undertones and more intricacy of the sequel's plot were no longer relevant. Finding the sweet spot between comedy, drama, and social criticism would have been no easy feat for a sequel of this kind. At the end of the day, Forrest Gump is a masterpiece from the 90s that captures an entire generation, touches on many historical events, and keeps Jenny's legacy front and center. Given the potential for a sequel to water down the original or unwittingly degrade its reputation, it was likely for the best that the decision to not make one was made. Furthermore, it is important to keep the film's distinct and nostalgic appeal intact instead than trying to expand the plot, because you pointed out that certain parts of the original film would be considered problematic by today's standards. Forrest Gump is a classic that will never go out of style thanks to its moving plot and unforgettable characters. Forrest Gump and Philadelphia, which Tom Hanks appeared in at the same time, were watershed moments in his career, and more generally, in Hollywood and societal consciousness. Major motion pictures featuring LGBT characters were still unusual in the early 1990s, and the film's content was very divisive, particularly in conservative quarters. Philadelphia starred Tom Hanks as Andrew Beckett, a brilliant lawyer whose employers wrongfully dismiss him upon learning of his AIDS diagnosis. The story revolves on Beckett's fight for justice and his legal battles against prejudice. Hanks's depiction of an HIV-positive character who lives openly was revolutionary since it went against the grain of the prevailing preconceptions and standards of the time. By bravely addressing AIDS discrimination and LGBTQ+ rights, the film brought attention to the difficulties experienced by those living with HIV/AIDS, especially in the workplace. As if that weren't enough, Philadelphia gave Andrew Beckett a human side, letting us feel compassion for his hardships and the injustices he faced. The film's goal in making Philadelphia was to raise consciousness about the AIDS epidemic and to question and combat bigotry and prejudice in society. The role that Tom Hanks played as Andrew Beckett, an AIDS patient and homosexual man, was a watershed event in Hollywood because it placed viewers in the position of the typical person of that time, who often misunderstood and feared those who were gay and had the disease. The film gave Andrew Beckett a human face by showing him to be a brave guy standing up to bigotry and injustice. The program's goal was to encourage viewers to reevaluate their prejudices and attitudes in order to cultivate empathy and understanding. As Joe Miller, played by Denzel Washington, goes from being an apprehensive about aiding an AIDS patient to a staunch supporter of equality and justice, he embodies the common man's perspective. Philadelphia accomplished its goals of increasing public understanding of AIDS, beginning dialogues about prejudice and stigma, and challenging conventional wisdom, all of which led to a more accepting and compassionate society toward those who are HIV positive. Actor Tom Hanks gained fame not just for his part in Philadelphia, but also for his tireless campaigning and charitable work related to HIV/AIDS and related technologies. His unwavering support for these organizations highlighted his determination to make a meaningful difference beyond the realm of entertainment. The intentional uncertainty surrounding Jenny's diagnosis keeps Forrest Gump and her sickness vital in the larger context of HIV/AIDS awareness, even though the character isn't explicitly linked to AIDS activism. Even though Jenny's diagnosis is not brought up directly in Forrest Gump, her character still represents the struggles and difficulties experienced by those living with HIV/AIDS at that time. The fact that Tom Hanks is involved in both films shows how dedicated he is to utilizing his fame for good in a variety of ways. He helped dispel myths and preconceptions about AIDS and HIV via his film roles and charitable work, which brought attention to the reality of living with the disease. There are varying versions of how Jenny dies in Forrest Gump due to discrepancies between the book by Winston Groom and the film adaptations, as well as between the author's and screenwriter Eric Roth's statements regarding the subject over time. Hepatitis C is certainly listed as the reason of Jenny's death in Gump and Company, the second volume of the Forrest Gump series. Contrast this with the film adaptations, which imply that she dies of AIDS. It seems that the divergence is due to artistic decisions made when adapting. Doctors in the 1980s, when the film takes place, couldn't provide Jenny with a definitive diagnosis or adequate treatment, since hepatitis C wasn't found until 1989. One of the main ways that the blood-borne virus hepatitis C might spread in the 1980s was by direct blood contact, which was common among intravenous drug users who shared needles. In Forrest Gump, Jenny's character is shown to be dealing with drug misuse and has a rough history, which is in line with this element of hepatitis C transmission. The choice to make it seem like Jenny died of AIDS in the film could have been chosen to fit her storyline in with the larger story of the AIDS epidemic, which was a big deal back then. The film leaves it up to the audience to draw their own conclusions about her diagnosis, but it places it in the context of the AIDS epidemic and shows how the illness has devastated families and people. Seeing how several adaptations of the narrative handle Jenny's death provides a fascinating window into the creative process. In addition, it shows how the author's decisions impact the story and give the characters and their situations more depth. Symbolizing the hardships and tragedies that people endured at that time, Jenny's character is vital and emotionally impactful in Forrest Gump, regardless of the exact reason of her demise. In Forrest Gump, how did you feel about Jenny's demise? Use the space below to share your thoughts with us. We hope that this video has been of some use to you. If you like it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. The next video will be up soon, but till then, thank you for tuning in. I will miss you.